The review is now loading.
Welcome to Anime Review. Yet. Studio Bones, known the world over for creating some of the best shonen anime of this generation. But what if the studio responsible for such great shows as Soul Eater, Full Metal Alchemist, and Pretty Full Metal Alchemist took one of their most original concepts from those tales and said, hey, we can make this shittier. We would have Soul Eater not. And to a lesser extent, Noragami. Made in 2014, Noragami follows the story of a young protagonist destroying evil spirits with a weapon that also happens to be human. Whoops, wrong clip. Silly clip. How'd you get in there? Haha. Our story follows Yato, a lesser god trying to gain some notoriety and worshippers by granting wishes for humans and killing off phantoms with his human weapon or regalia named Tomo. But not all is well in the cult of Yato, and Tomo has grown all types of tired of being attached to a poor and unknown god with no shrine, so with Yato's permission, she bounces, leaving him to do jobs on his own. Who would have guessed that people don't like being forced into poverty? Wacky! Which leads us to Hiyori. She's a normal everyday high school student and also our other main character. She's walking down the street with her friends discussing their favorite MMA fighters when they come across a missing poster for a cat named My Lord, because children are stupid and name their pets stupid things. As it turns out, Yato is also looking for My Lord on the same street when he spots him in the middle of the road and rushes out to grab him, at which point Hiyori sees a bus barreling towards them. Keep this part in mind, it's gonna come up later. Hiyori, being the brave minx that she is, decides to rush out there and push Yato and My Lord out of the way, only to be hit by the bus herself, which ends up knocking her soul out of her body. Oops, wrong clip again. Wonder if that'll be the last one. So Hiyori ends up in the hospital alive and well, only to have Yato show up later on that evening in her sheets doing his best impersonation of Freddy fucking Krueger. He informs her that he's a god and that she's the only person that's ever tried to help him, so he came by to check on her and repay the favor, which is incredibly sweet, unless of course this is how you do it. So Yato, being the god that he is, decides to bolt and I guess wipe her memory for what seems like no reason. Although I guess linking into a girl's bed in order to say hi probably isn't the best way to make a first impression, so I kind of understand if he wanted a mulligan on that one. She wakes up with no memory of what happened, but a strange feeling that something isn't right, so upon seeing a missing poster for My Lord, she decides to turn into a frat boy and go on the most holy of quests to find that pussy. Tail. We're going with tail on this one? Yeah. Meanwhile, Yato has found My Lord, praise be unto him, and tries to snatch up that tail, when all of a sudden, a phantom attacks. Hiyori shows up in the nick of time, somehow, and saves the two by becoming Breakneck Head Stomp, deliverer of migraines. But the phantom isn't down for good, so Yato grabs Hiyori and the two make a hasty escape, when Yato points out something interesting and new about Hiyori. She has a tail now? Because of course she does. Why? You might be wondering. Well, the answer is her soul slipped out of her body. You see, her Final Destination experience earlier left her kind of trapped between the world of the living and the far world, which is essentially the spirit world, so now whenever she gets tired or stressed out, her soul can just slip right out of her body like a white guy in a Magnum. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything, alright? No. No. Moving on. After giving the phantom the slip, Yato returns My Lord back to his rightful owner, a little boy who had made a wish to him that his cat would return home safely. Yato eventually returns to Hiyori to inform her that he'll help her out with her soul problem for the low cost of 5 yen, which she gratefully accepts, only to discover that he requires a new regalia in order to do it, which somehow becomes her problem. Thinking that all spirits are the same, she goes up to every little phantom that she finds asking if they want the job. Coming up deuces, she spots a storm of phantoms and decides to head towards it with high hopes. What's a storm of phantoms, you might be wondering? Well, it's it's exactly what it sounds like. So Yato gets a call from Hiyori saying that she found the perfect regalia for him. He heads down there only to have it be another giant phantom, which I guess Hiyori didn't recognize as a spawn of Satan from the first one that attacked her. Also, why isn't that phantom attacking Hiyori while she just like waits for Yato to show up? Does she have magical plot armor? Huh, Bones? Did you do it? Did you Did you give her plot armor? Like... So Yato shows up, freaks out, and bolts, but Hiyori goes full Yu Yu Hakusho and tries to fight the Phantom in her spirit form, only to have it almost chomp down on her tail. Yato comes to the rescue, explaining that if her tail gets severed, she'll die. Because, you know, if she didn't have some debilitating weakness, there would be literally no reason for any other character in this show. So they make a run for it again, only this time they can't shake the Phantom, and Yato miraculously comes across a stray soul that has yet to be corrupted. You know, it's funny how things just show up when they're most needed in this show. Yeah, real funny that. So he convinces it to be his Regalia, names it Yuki, turns it into a sword, and cuts down the Phantom in one swipe. We find out that the Regalia is actually a young boy who died and has no memory of his prior life, and that is where our story begins. Dear Yato. Okay, let's just begin with the animation. Being a newer show, Noragami's animation is actually pretty solid, but that's not saying much, because not much really happens. Much of this show is either talking, sitting, eating, or slapstick comedy, with the vast majority of its fight scenes being very short and uneventful, but more on the fight scenes later. Also, Yato has this weird Photoshop lens flare teleportation power. It doesn't look very good. And whenever Yato starts daydreaming, he always envisions it like it's fucking No Game No Life, which, yeah, looks cool, but is a really weird stylistic choice for the show. And while I understand that Hiyori's tail and to some extent the Phantoms have a similar look, it doesn't exactly make sense that the whole world would look that way in his daydreams. Although I will say that some scenes look incredibly pretty, mostly due to the usage of light and shadows, which fits extremely well for the theme of being stuck between the world of the living and the dead. I would have liked to have seen it used more, but as it is, it does look pretty cool whenever it shows up. Now let me bring it back to the fighting for a second. This show really feels like it wants to be a shonen, and the crux of any good shonen is amazing fight scenes, but Noragami doesn't really have any. Most of the fight scenes go something like this. Something shows up, attacks them, Yato and crew run away, until Yato gets tired of it, takes out his sword, swings it, says a word, end scene. Seriously, almost every single time. He just swings his sword, shouts a word, problem solved. And while those scenes might not always be reused animation, it certainly starts to feel like it the more it happens, to the point where I just expect him to start screaming out, "Moon Tiara! Magic!" And if I'm being completely honest, it actually feels like Sailor Moon might have had some better fight scenes. And I shouldn't be able to say that. Ever. About anything. What the fuck? Noragami. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. The opening song for this show, ear crack, okay? It's ear crack. It's crack for your ears. That's what it is. It's upbeat, catchy, and all around sets the tone for the shonen that this show is obviously trying to be. It's very reminiscent to me of an opening like GTO's Driver's High. It has a lot of energy and it gets you pumped up and ready for the action that this show sadly doesn't deliver on. But still, the song is good. And remember when I said that Yato's daydreams in the spiritual world to some extent all kind of have like a no game, no life feel to them? And I wish they'd gone with a different stylistic choice to better accent the light and dark theme? This is that choice. The intro sequence is mostly grayscale, with some color to highlight important parts, and that style perfectly fits the light and dark theme that this show sometimes tries to go for. The end sequence follows this format, but instead of being upbeat and catchy, it's very downplayed and melancholy, as is the way with most animes nowadays, but in this case, it really works. See, while the intro primarily focuses on Yato, the other gods, and the action, the outro focuses on Hiyori, day-to-day life, and segments involving death. This is the perfect coupling to tie together the theme, and I wish this much work had gone into the rest of the show, because if it had, we would probably have a really amazing end result. The rest of the audio is average at best. I mean, I like the voice work, but I've only seen it subbed, so I really don't have much else to go off of. Now when it comes to the characters, that I do have something to say about. We begin with Yato, our aforementioned lesser god, looking for some worshippers, who also happens to be our main character, and as such, he provides the show with most of its comic relief and action. Now, while neither of those are delivered in the show very well, Yato himself is still a very interesting character, because he seems so lighthearted and nonchalant, but when shit goes down, he gets this look on his face, like he knows what's gonna happen, he's been there, and you've already lost. Yeah, that one. It gives him this genuine feeling of being an old soul, which is perfect, since he is. The most interesting thing for me, though, about him as a character isn't that. It's how jaded he is about humanity, how it seems like he just gave up on us a long time ago. There are several scenes where humans are in desperate need of help, but he seems almost callous about it, like he's the Greek god of not giving a fuck, which I've recently been informed would be named Octavius Keepinomalis. But through his friendship with Hiyori, he does seem to lighten up throughout the course of the show and begin to care again. Not to mention how much he seems to care about Yuki, even though that kid is like a broken fire hydrant filled with piss that ruins everything he touches to the point where you just want to grab him and choke and calm down. Calm down. Right now is Yato's time. We'll get to Yuki soon enough. Just focus on Yato. Just focus on Yato. Now this story, the story of the jaded warrior being brought back to humanity by his friends, it's been told thousands of times throughout history in a lot of different ways, but this show does it in a charming enough way that I don't really mind it all that much. Yato's design also really complements his character by showing his aloofness and how little he cares about what anybody thinks without being too over the top about it. A jumpsuit and a torn up ascot. Can't really get much more casual than that. But the thing about Yato that really makes me want to understand why he acts this way and does all these things and dresses this way isn't just because he acts this way. It's how the other gods act towards him. They range from mockery to affection to anger and even fear, but the one trait that they all seem to have in common is respect. Because behind Yato's goofiness and his nonchalant demeanor, his past has a sinister story. A story written in blood, carved into the corpses of thousands of— Hey! The clip did the thing again! Man, we were doing so well too. Hiyori acts as kind of our second main character, depending on how you look at it. The story unfolds mostly from her perspective, which you would think makes her the main character, but we're not really following her story. We're following Yato's story through her eyes, which I really like. It's kind of a second-person perspective form of storytelling, and while it's not entirely original, it does work here, and I really enjoyed it. Now, a lot of people, when they see a female in anime, like to lump them together into these arbitrary categories, like moe, tsundere, or yandere. But Hiyori doesn't necessarily subscribe solely to any of these cliched roles. She's a high school student who likes watching mixed martial arts, but she doesn't necessarily excel at anything herself. Her personality ranges from mad to embarrassed to motherly and protective, all the way to kind of badass at times, and while she's not the most well-developed character I've ever seen, she's still pretty well written and relatable. But the thing that really brings it together for her as a character is that you see all the other characters through her eyes and watch the world unfold with her. Now, while I enjoy the character herself, the show kind of drops the ball when it comes to utilizing her. She's the character between the light and the dark of the series, stuck between the living and the dead, the one we're supposed to relate to, but while she's a relatable character, nothing really relatable happens to her. We spend most of our time with her in the spirit world and barely see how it reflects on the real world. Oh, that better not be an Inuyasha clip. And that's a damn shame, because when you have two worlds colliding like that, there needs to be a conflict, some kind of cause and effect, and in this case, the spirit world needs to cause an effect on the real world, but thus far it doesn't really. As it is, it just kind of seems like, fine, show it. She's the to Yato's Inuyasha! Falling into the well of death and strung along for the ride. She starts off as a normal girl in MMA, then dies and becomes a confused girl in New World, then somehow becomes stronger than the god trying to protect her, but because they can't have that, they give her a debilitating weakness and make her Yuki's surrogate mother, and end with her as a damsel in distress. And all of this is damn disappointing because I really like this character, but it seems like the story had no idea what to do with her, so they tried her out wherever the plot demanded, and it fucking sucks. Did you get all that? And now, Yuki. Couldn't get the wrong clip on this one, huh? I hate everything about him, okay? I hate his smug prick face, I hate his stupid hair, I hate his voice, I hate his attitude, I even hate him when he's a blade, okay? Ooh, you have a bandage around your handle, yeah, we get it, he's broken. Fuck your metaphor, fuck this shitty blade, and fuck this kid. Okay, let me take it back a bit. Like I said, Yato comes across Yuki when looking for a regalia. Yuki's soul has basically been wandering around and hasn't been corrupted yet, so when he's offered the job, he accepts. Afterwards, Yuki turns into a katana with a long bandage for a handle, and the two kill things together. So far, so good, right? Except for the fact that this kid is a prick. Seriously, for someone who can't remember anything, this little bastard has more baggage than LAX. Literally, the first thing Yuki says in the entire series happens when he's shivering in the snow and Yato takes off his jacket to hand it to him to keep him warm. This kid, shivering and freezing his ass off, rejects it because it smells like sweat. Prissy little bitch. So right off the bat, someone tries to do something nice for him and he's a dick about it, and that pretty much sums up his entire character. Alright, I'm gonna warn you up front, there's gonna be a spoiler right now because I can't properly bitch about this kid without it being in, so if you're not interested in the spoiler, you don't want to hear my thoughts on him and you want to watch the show spoiler free, click right here to go to the side characters. Okay, everyone ready? Everyone properly warned? Okay, good. The thing about becoming a regalia is when you do, you make a contract with the god, and you get a little red tattoo with whatever name they give you because I guess the dead can't remember their names or something. I don't know, it's never explained. Anyways, the thing about that tattoo is that it directly connects you to whatever god gave it to you. So if you do something bad, or you think something bad, it physically hurts that god. Yuki knows this. Yato told him, like, right off the bat. So having this information, what does Yuki do? Well, he starts off by destroying windows and stealing shit and moves on to sexual harassment. And let me explain that last part, because I don't think those two words do a sufficient enough job of describing the little bastard that he is. You see, at one point Yuki gets tired of living with Yato, so he moves in with Hiyori, and her family can't see him because he's a spirit, so he's basically living there on the down low. But the thing about Yuki is that he's afraid of the dark, so Hiyori kind of acts as like his big sister and lets him sleep with her, you know, for like comfort. Keep in mind this kid is around 12 years old, so while she's sleeping next to him, he tries to grope her. Just tries to grope her. Do you see where the hate is coming from? It gets to the point where all the bad stuff that Yuki's doing starts to corrupt Yato with like spirit cancer or something, and as it's literally killing him, Yuki just doesn't give the teeniest, tiniest fuck whatsoever. Yato has literally never done anything bad to this kid. He takes him in, looks out for him, gets him fed and clothed, and through all of that, Yuki just keeps on being a selfish little bitch, even though it's killing Yato. Why, you ask? There's gotta be some reason that he's an asshole, right? Oh, there is. He's sad he died and doesn't have any friends. You know why you don't have any friends, Yuki? It's because you're an asshole. And I think I know how you died. Someone killed you. And that person, Yuki, that person is a saint. The only question I have is how did it take 12 years for someone to do it? I seriously cannot put into words how much I super mega loathe this character, and it's not even a good hate, like when you find a villain that you just viscerally despise because he's so good at it. Yeah, like, I don't know who that character is, but I'm sure the clip knows what it's doing, so him, yeah, like him. I mean, this kid is supposed to be one of the good guys, but for 7 out of this show's 12 episodes, he's the worst thing about it. That's right, his little face lasts for 7 fucking episodes. I counted them! I counted them! It's essentially the main plot for the majority of the show, and that is fucking mind-boggling to me. I mean, I could get it if this kid ended up being a villain or an irredeemable bad guy. That I could totally respect, but he's not. He's cutlery. I mean, just imagine how good it would have been if Yuki ended up being corrupted and becoming an irredeemable villain that Yato had to kill after taking him in under his wing. That would have been good storytelling, but nope! What we end up getting is a feel-good ending that's supposed to make us like Yuki again. No, I don't like you, and I never have, and I never will. I mean, every time he was on the screen, I just wanted to reach into the monitor and strangle him with a belt. And I know what you're thinking. Shinjen, that's not funny, that's child abuse. Well, you know what? The child abused me first with this bullshit. As for side characters, there's a lot, but I'm only gonna focus on the other gods and regalias for now. First off, we have the 3 other gods that show up, these being Tenjin, Bishamon, and Kofuku, each of which having their own regalia, with some having more than one. Tenjin, for instance, has his own female harem of regalias, while Bishamon has around 8 that transform into something on her person, from her suit, to her earrings, to her guns. Kofuku is the only god besides Yato to have only 1 regalia, but I think her regalia is probably my favorite of the bunch. His name is Daikoku, and of all the regalias, he seems to have the most personality, and be the most protective. Not much is really said about the guy, except for the fact that he's extremely protective of Kofuku, especially when it comes to Yato being around, and for some reason that he's also protective of children, which of course the show uses to make a pedophile joke, because when this show sees an easy joke by god or regalia, they go for it. But that aside, he's probably the character I want to know the most about, next to Yato. Now that's not to say that the rest of the regalias are boring, although for the most part they are, but the ones that are interesting are mostly interesting because of what they do for the plot and not so much for who they are as a character. So because of that, I don't really see the point in talking about any of the other regalias, because if I did, it would probably spoil large portions of the show. Moving back to the gods for a second, I don't really think there's much to say about Tenjin or Kofuku. Kofuku mostly serves as your Moe type mystic character who knows way more than she's letting on. So when you think of her, think of like Haruhi or Fuko, but at their basest level. Tenjin, on the other hand, is the crotchety old man. That's pretty much it. He's clearly the most popular of the gods with the biggest shrine and the most regalias, but aside from that, he seems really unimportant to the series so far. He seems to have this really weird rivalry with Yato, but at the end of the day, it just boils down to him like picking on Yato. Almost like he's his granddad or something. Honestly, I really didn't see the point of this character, and I feel like he can just kind of be taken out of the series without changing much. And lastly, we have Bishamon, who is hands down the most interesting character of the three. She has and utilizes almost 10 different regalia all at the same time, which seems to make her very powerful and feared. Also, she has a vendetta against Yato, and I'm not gonna spoil why, but I will say that when you find out, it does a great job of adding another layer of mystery to both characters. Also, just so you know, the plot between those two, it doesn't resolve in the first season. So I'm actually pretty interested to see where it goes in the next. We also have two antagonists that I'm gonna go ahead and call White-Haired Guy and Creepy Girl, because if I said anything more about them, it would pretty much spoil the entire show for you. So there you have our cast of characters, but what does the show do with them? Well, not much, honestly. You see, the mark of great writing is to begin with a question and end with an answer, and in this series we do get two good questions, and depending on who you believe to be the main character, both are incredibly relevant. Our first question is whether or not Hiyori's body and soul will ever be one again, and our second question is whether or not Yato will ever gain the notoriety that he desires. Both of these are good questions and a strong start to the show, but neither one gets resolved or makes any real progress towards resolution. Hiyori's entire storyline basically just gets thrown to the wayside as if nobody cares about it anymore past episode 2. And Yato does end up granting a few wishes, but most of it's just menial labor that any human could do, or he's granting wishes for other gods. And this is counterintuitive and stupid. Let's take a look back at Yato for a second. He wants to be revered, have a big ol' shrine like Tenjin, and millions of worshippers, right? Then why the hell is he taking jobs from other gods? And to add on to it, why would they give him jobs that they're probably better equipped to deal with themselves? He's not going to gain any worshippers from the people hiring him since they themselves are already gods, so what's the point? And it's not just a one-off thing either, it happens repeatedly. There's a bit of a dirty word when it comes to anime, and that word is episodic. For those who don't know, episodic just means that each episode is self-contained and doesn't add very much to the overall plot. But I think this show in particular could have actually used the episodic format to great effect. Imagine if instead of spending 7 episodes on Yuki's angsty ass, we spent like 1 on him, maybe, or you know, just killed him off, and then focused on Yato performing realistic tasks that humans would actually wish for, like finding a lost child, dealing with the death of a loved one, or maybe a child dealing with their parents' divorce. There's literally an endless amount of scenarios that Yato could have been focusing on instead of scrubbing toilets or working the counter at a liquor store. They could have ranged from funny to depressing to heartfelt, and through these scenarios, we could have gotten to know both Yato and Hiyori better as characters. Not to mention they could have shown other gods competing with him for those jobs and introduced them that way. So the question then becomes, why didn't they go that route? And I'll tell you why. Pacing. You know, that thing I don't use when I speak. I meant it when I said this show wanted to be a shonen, only that was a bit of an understatement. It wants to be the shonen, the next big thing. You can tell because the pacing is all over the place. It's like they thought they would have Naruto episodes to work with, so they just did whatever the hell they wanted, because why the hell not? They would have all the episodes in the world to work with, right? Right?
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong.
This series only had 12 episodes, with the second season rumored for over a year, which still hasn't come to fruition. If they wanted to leave a lasting impression, become a phenomenon, the next big thing, they should have focused more on the world they created than Yuki's feelings or Yato's relationships. Because they really did create an interesting world, but instead of exploring it, they spent 7 episodes on a non-main character and almost a full episode on filler only to introduce a villain who's probably not the main villain and get no closure on either of the main characters' storylines. So now that we've gone over characters and storyline, we have one more thing to talk about. Plot holes. This show has a lot of plot holes. Remember why I said this? As it turns out, Yato is also looking for Milord on the same street when he spots him in the middle of the road and rushes out to grab him. At which point Hiyori sees a bus barreling towards them. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense considering the fact that later on, Yato goes on to explain that normal humans can't see gods or spirits. So how did Hiyori? Was she special some way before the accident, more perceptive than a normal human, closer to spirits? I don't fucking know, because the show never explains it. And that is kind of a big ass plot hole to just leave open since, you know, it's the premise for the entire show. Also, Yato's explanation for the reason that humans can't see him makes even less sense. He says the reason humans can't see him is the same reason that they don't remember everybody in a crowd. They just blend in. What? Okay, that would make some sense if you weren't the only person in the crowd in a jumpsuit with blue hair and an ascot. But you are, and it doesn't! Also, if that's the case, how come people can't see him when he is hovering directly above them, or at a table at a restaurant? The shit doesn't make any sense! It would have been way easier and made more sense to just say, oh yeah, people can see us whenever we let them, because magic, instead of trying to explain it in a way that when you think about it, literally makes less sense than magic! Also, why does he eat? He is a god, Yuki is a spirit. Neither of them have a physical body! They make a huge point to say how detached they are from the world of the living, and the only reason to eat is to give your body energy and nutrients. So why in Satan's asshole are they eating? Now you might think this is just random nitpicking, and honestly if they had just shown one scene with them like eating with Hiyori or something, wouldn't have even brought it up. But eating is actually a fucking plot point in this show. Tomo left Yato because she was tired of being hungry. Yato steals food from people, Yuki's stomach growls. How? And more importantly, why? The reason this irritates me so much is because throughout the series, especially early on, they spend so much time either being hungry or eating food instead of, you know, doing jobs or helping Hiyori or doing jobs. This is called filler. And in this show, it's incredibly pointless filler that they don't even try to explain. And speaking of not explaining shit, Hiyori lives in both the world of the living and the dead, right? Her spirit can just hop out of her body and mob along with other spirits. So when Yato asked for regalia, why didn't she just do it? We already know that she's stronger in the spirit world than she is in the human world, that she can fight, and that she's a spirit just like Yuki. The only difference being she's not entirely dead. So why couldn't she do it? Is she not entirely dead, or would her tail still be there so she'd still be in danger? Or is she just like not uncorrupted? Because if Yuki's ass can pass, I'm pretty sure anyone can. Seriously, what is it? Just give me a reason. Just give me any reason at all. Show any reason, because since episode 2, that shit has irked me something fierce. And on the subject of regalias, why does Yato have only one? We already know that gods can have more than one, and that gods like Tenjin and Bishamon are super powerful because they have a harem of regalias. So why does he limit himself to one? I mean, his entire goal is to gain notoriety and power, right? And we already know that Bishamon is incredibly powerful because she has like a dozen regalia. So why the hell wouldn't he? Is there a reason? Is he limited to one? Does he not like regalias? Do they not like him because he's poor or because of his past? And if that's the case, then that makes even less sense, because when you found Yuki, the kid was basically a clean slate and had no idea that Yato was poor or even that he was a god. So wouldn't the same apply to any spirit that wasn't yet a regalia? I demand answers. Now with everything that I've said, you probably think I hate this show, but the truth is, I kinda like it. Or at least, the premise of it. The idea that gods have to grant wishes to gain notoriety is kinda cool. And it sets up a world that sadly doesn't get much development, but still, it's a novel concept. Also, I am interested to learn more about characters like Yato, Bishamon, and Daikoku, and from what I hear, a second season is in the works with focus on some of those characters. So it should at least prove interesting, but we'll see when it comes out. But what do you guys think? Is my optimism for the next season misguided? Were my critiques too harsh? And of course, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. And boom, annotations. Shingen out. Yato eventually returns to Hiyori and informs her that he'll help her out with her soul problem for low cost of pride Ken. What are you saying? What are these words? You can't just make up words. I'm gonna make up some fucking words. Yato eventually returns to Hiyori and informs her that he's gonna help her out with her soul situation for low cost of 5 yen. She accepts gratefully, but then it turns, but only to be informed. Fuck, only to be informed. Not but, only to be informed. Only not but. Wrong conjunction. And remember when I said that Yato's daydreams and to some extent the spirit world all kind of have like a fucking... I shit you not, I've been recording for 3 hours. I'm not even halfway done. Yup. It's gonna be a long review, cause I'm anal. See, well the Oakening, Professor Oakening. Yes, Ash, I'm Professor Oak. We will now have an Oakening. Well, what's that, Professor? Oh, you'll find out. There are several scenes where humans are in desperate need of help, but he seems almost callous about it. I need your water. Lubricate my throating hole. Shouldn't say that on the internet. She starts off as a normal girl into MMA and then dies and becomes a confused girl in the new world. Then all of a sudden she's stronger than the god who's supposed to be protecting her, but given a debilitating weakness she becomes a mother, a protective figure, then a damsel in distress. It's like this show didn't know what to do with her, so Jay just drew her every famous Jet Jackson.
Believe in the Kamina who believes in you!